Hey internet friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lindsay, LiJo. Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be speaking about boredom. Now, do you experience boredom? Do people you know experience boredom? We're going to be talking about that today. If you would like to book a session with me on Snug to talk about the cognitive functions, anything related to personality and self-growth, you can do so below with my video link. So let's get started with this video. All right, so why do people experience boredom? This was an actual question that I had because, in fact, it is not something that I feel as though I regularly or really experience at all. So I went to go find out why people were bored or how they got bored or what was related to their boredom. I polled a group of people, and what I found was that it narrowed down to really two main areas. And the first area was people who experience boredom didn't know either what they had to do or what they wanted to do. So essentially there was no kind of backlog that existed in their brains for what was to come up next. We're going to be talking about the backlog again in a moment. And the second thing is that people who experienced boredom felt as though there were some obligation to remain in a situation, usually social, that they could not really escape from. So that would be an example of a boring conversation. So a lot of the people seem to align within these two categories. And honestly, as an INTJ, after really hearing like those were the main reasons that people did experience boredom, I was like, well, it really does make sense that I don't necessarily experience boredom the way people perceive it. All right, so let's first talk about knowing what you should do, right? So the mental backlog, as I like to call it. So with introverted intuition, NI, which is the first savior function of the INTJs and INFJs, it's as though you always are looking at a backlog. Now, a backlog, as I'm referring to it here, is basically a categorical list of to-dos. So constantly our first function is building this project-oriented to-do list. This is not something we are consciously doing. It's something that is happening by default because once we have established an endpoint, our brain has automatically, because of that, put in the steps in place to move forward on the line to that goal. So even if we don't do the thing, we always are seeing in our heads the thing that is needing to be done, the next piece, the next step. And so we don't have, as I like to say, the luxury of not knowing what to do. And I say it's a luxury because one of the hardest things for NI is not to be thinking about the next thing that's coming up. So it's like that issue of not being in the moment, not being present, but like constantly. So whenever we're in one place, our brain is already looking at the backlog. It's like, what's coming up? What is the next thing? What do I have to be preparing for that's next on this list? So one of the big reasons we don't experience boredom is because all day long, whether we want to or not, we are staring at a backlog. And this is also a reason that when INTJs, and I would assume INFJs as well, when we actually plan for chill time, it surprisingly works out for us because we're able to look at it, know that it's coming up, and factor it in just as we would with anything else. Now, the problem will be is if we don't factor in chill time, we just can't really just make it happen. Like we just can't, flow into it. Because again, the ticker's always looking at the next thing within the backlog. So if it doesn't exist within the backlog, essentially it doesn't exist at all. All right, and so for the next main reason that people feel as though they are bored is because they get stuck in kind of social situations in which I like to think that they actually have some level of obligation to respecting the surroundings and kind of like the nature of what is happening. Now, as an INTJ, anyone with an FE function that's not in their top 4 or lower, if you were to look at the 8 cognitive function model, INTJs have that FE 7th place. So it's really, really far away from us. So when we are gauging a social situation and we know that there's something that's exists on our backlog, something that's to happen, it is very hard for us to stay in a situation in which we feel it doesn't have any value except the social, emotional value spectrum of people, because there is not that FE function that is being respected. I honestly think some people just have a greater tolerance for enduring the bullshit of the conversation. Now, if we've made out the conversation to be some kind of goal that we're trying to we're going to learn how to dominate this kind of conversation, or we're going to learn how to talk through this conversation, that's a different thing. But when we're stuck in a situation or a context that may be considered boring, the thing is, we don't stay long enough for it to become boring. These are the situations where I'll kind of move myself and go, and work on my laptop, or I will, leave the conversation in general. I think there's a few videos in the past where people have been kind of speaking on my behalf who are just yeah, Lindsay will just get up and go. If the situation really isn't, I don't know what the right word is. Basically, I don't feel the obligation to remain just for the social emotional value. And so I think that's another piece that ties in with the whole boredom thing, is because people will tolerate this feeling of boredom for the sake of the social value, which is something that INTJs will not specifically do, and then other types with low FE as well. So that is a little bit of my perspective on why I believe INTJs in particular may not experience boredom. Now, I'm sure there's some out there who do, and I'm sure we all at some point experience some level of boredom right before we allow ourselves to move in that situation. But that's my overall view for now. So what is your type? Do you experience boredom? If so, how do you experience boredom? Why do you believe you experience it? I'm actually interested to know, because this is a really interesting concept to me, because it is something that seems very foreign to my own psychology. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe so that you can find more of my content without simply searching my name. So I will see you in my next video. Till next time. Goodbye, internet friends.